Hi, my name is TBSKYEN. I have a beard, and I am very busy, and I thought it would be nice to talk with my friend Scarizard about that, because he's also got a beard, and he's also very busy. How you doing, man?
Hey, Skyen. Like you said, I am Scarizard or Scarizard. Honestly, you can't really go wrong. I'm not very picky. I have a beard and am in fact busy. So busy. I was yelling about this on Twitter. It's just really funny to me. There's no bad blood as far as I know. This podcast isn't a trap, but we tried to film this 6 months ago. And he pitched the name Busy Beards. And I was like, oh, that's so good. And then we've been literally too busy for like 6 months to make it happen.
Yeah,
so,
there's a problem with the premise right there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it works. I mean, look, buddy, that's just 6 months of content. There it is. We've got it going. We have stuff to talk about. So what? So yeah, I guess hit me with how you're feeling. How's everything going over in Magical Europe land?
Yeah, Magical Europe land. I basically literally just kind of stumbled in the door after, I think in the last 24 hours, I've spent like 14 hours on a bus and 3 on a ferry, because I've been visiting family who live, of course, the absolute opposite end of the country. So I'm a little bit loopy. But I feel like maybe like before we do anything else, we should kind of introduce ourselves so people know who the hell is talking.
Sure.
So I'll go first.
You drive. I got it. Yeah, I'm here for fun.
I figure I'll go first and say that I'm TBSKYEN. I guess at this point, I'm almost more famous for having a YouTube channel than anything else. But I do have a YouTube channel where I talk about art and design and writing and stuff. And I'm a freelance artist. I do comics and illustrations and all kinds of stuff for people. And I'm very busy while I do that. And you?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, it's actually funny. I was talking about doing this. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this with my friend Skyen. And someone in my community was like, oh, he's the guy that makes the lore videos on YouTube. And I was like, it was weird for me that I'm like, you mean the comics guy? and they're like, no, well, I guess he does comics too. I guess that's a thing. No, I am Scarizard, former Riot Games designer, patch notes guy, et cetera, et cetera. But for the last, year plus, I have been doing independent content creation, focused mainly around my Twitch stream. So streamed. I at this point I've beaten like 73 individual games. We're trucking through it. We're moving quite along. But yeah, I also have a YouTube channel. I have a new YouTube series that should be going up today, actually, like within a few hours of us recording this. So that'll be exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talking about games, playing games, having fun with games, building communities, all that jazz. That's me. That's your boy.
Yeah, definitely your boy. And we're going to put a link to like anything we mentioned during the podcast that we're working on. There's going to be a link to that down in the description down below, so you can all go and check that out. And you should, because, Patrick Scarizard is very good at stuff. He's called Patrick in real life, and I keep messing that up.
It's okay. There's no rules. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah. He's very good at stuff.
I'm Googleable.
Is what I'm saying. Well, and you should watch the things he do. He does.
Similarly, for like the 3 people from my stream who are going to listen to this, please go sub to Skyen on YouTube. I'm not going to let you just say nice things about me, buddy, and not reciprocate. No, he's for a very long time, despite, getting into stuff as comics and your art style, it's continued to grow and get a lot better. I actually think of you more as a very good critic of, which is a weird thing. I know critics mostly suck, but no, when it comes to not only art direction in games, but also things like, I feel like you're able to talk about the consistency or good or badness of writing in a story without being like, but the plot holes, but this thing doesn't make sense. And so, for people out there who really like, essayist types on ruminating on kind of game discussion, Skyen is a good little voice to kind of stitch right into your repertoire.
Yeah, I do try to avoid the kind of, because that's kind of what criticism has been on the internet for a long time, has been like a lot of the comedy criticism especially has been very much about, that thing is logically inconsistent with this other thing within the narrative. And that's there's nothing wrong with that particularly, but like stuff, like a lot of video series and stuff I see, they kind of tend to hyper focus on that and forget that there's a theme, there's an overarching narrative, like there's character development, there's all this other stuff that's also kind of important to assessing whether a story or indeed, a piece of media, a game is any good. It's the same thing with like, you can't just say a video game should be fun. because Papers, Please is not at all fun. Dark Souls is often not at all fun. Like, it's fucking stressful. But it's enjoyable, like, and it's not always about just that one thing, like being consistent in the plotting. It's not always about that for a good story. Like Lord of the Rings is deeply inconsistent, and it's one of the greatest stories ever told. It's the same thing with The Hobbit.
Yeah. Well, and maybe this is unless you had something specific you wanted to go into. I was going to say maybe this is a good jumping point into a discussion. I think. I think when you say not all games have to be fun. It's not something I don't like hard disagree with it or anything. But it's like I've played a lot of games over the last year, like 70 or so, like I think I mentioned. And I liked a lot of them that I did not have fun with. You know, like, and it's weird because Souls for me is a bit of a different situation. I think when you stream Souls, it's very, once you cut through like the randos who are there to like heckle you, I think that's like the worst part of it, honestly. I recommended to my friend Sarah, shout out to Sarah, that she streamed Souls, and her stream's been seeing a ton of growth. She's like challenging herself to beat these bosses, and like every day there's like a rando who's like, why haven't you used this sword? Or like, oh, does she know where the incredible spoiler is? And it's like, fuck off, man. But no, there's like there's just to if we're doing, you know, game recommendations, I don't know if anything's on or off the table. There's a game out there called Lisa. And Lisa is a game I have a hard time recommending. There's like a couple trigger warnings or content warnings, I believe is the accepted term these days around. There's some like psychological abuse. I think there's some gore. There's some. It's I can't even really list all of the things it kind of dabbles into, but it is it's like if Earthbound was horribly dark, and so basically it's light, it's weird, it's funny at times, but it deals with the end of humanity and kind of post-apocalyptic landscape, not in like a fun let's go explore Fallout way, but in sort of like a you are watching and seeing the absolute crumble of the sanity of the last bits of humanity, and all along that you are a retired martial arts teacher from before, you know, the bomb went off or whatever, that's trying to find his adopted daughter in the landscape of terrible psychos and fucked up maniacs. And it's one of those games that feels like, wow, I've seen a lot of unique things. I've seen a lot of things I may never see again. The difficulty curve, the way you can like recruit like 60 different characters. You can also play Russian roulette to gamble their lives away for money. I recruited a fish with legs. You know, it's out there. It's super crazy. And then it'll also maybe like make you cry somewhere in between. So sorry for my long thing. I'm just saying Lisa is always my game that like, if you feel brave enough and secure enough to go hunt that game out, you're going to get an experience that is different from anything you've seen. But it will cost you something in return. Yeah. And that's kind of the thing. That's like a lot of great art is just it's not necessarily pleasant or pleasurable. And that's something that I've kind of been meaning to do a video on it for the longest time, because that's a really old discussion in artwork that kind of started with like with modernism, really, in the 20th century, where artists were like, okay, cameras exist now, so why would I want to draw portraits anymore? And that's when you get the arrival of like stuff like Cubism and all these sort of weird, completely out there art styles where artists are kind of searching for what can we do that cameras can't. And that's when you get like artists, especially like Picasso, but also like Bach and that kind of crew who deal in, okay, so let's do something that a photograph can't do. Let's communicate absolute vile revulsion and disgust. Let's communicate alienation. Let's communicate fear. Let's communicate pain and suffering. And you get some great paintings out of that, and also a lot of sort of self-obsessed, pretentious wank, obviously. But you get a lot of great paintings out of that are just not. I would not want to have them on my wall because they would just make me miserable and depressed. But they're interesting artworks. Like they have a lot to say, they have a lot to communicate, but it's not. There's no fun there. There's no pleasure whatsoever. And that's very old discussion in art. I'm kind of interested to see how that's been kind of seeping into gaming, like for the longest time, because Nintendo still runs the line of games should be fun for everyone. Oh yeah, and I'm such a sucker for that too. By the way,
Me too.
And I think also, it's 2018. Our world isn't in the best state. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. And I remember we were watching, I think, some Nintendo Direct some whiles back with my Discord, and we were just all kind of in a voice chat hanging out. And Nintendo announced a small new, maybe it's a new IP, maybe it's not, but the core conceit is that it is it's a match 3 game, but it's themed as you're battling other sushi chefs.
Oh yeah, Sushi Striker.
On a conveyor belt of sushi in a world where sushi's been outlawed, and you have to like, I don't know, just everything about like the wrappings of that game was like, some people were like, that's lame, but I was like, are you kidding? Like, that's adorable. Like, maybe the game isn't fun, and if it's not fun, then whatever, it'll disappear into the darkness and obscurity. But if it's not, like, or even if it is, I appreciate that they went for it. I appreciate that they tried some goofy spin on a narrative theming that feels unlike other things that you've seen. Give me more campiness, give me more goofiness. Yeah. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I feel like with games like because I remember like the first time I played Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the first one, the nuclear explosion sequence kind of got to me a lot, because like, okay, this game actually wants to let you know that nukes they're not fun. It's not super great, and maybe having the American military charging in with a gun at the end of all of their collective dicks to solve the problem in the Middle East is not a great way to help things out. That was kind of impressive. And then we get to Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and then there's the airport sequence. And the thing that struck me about that, outside of all just this, it was trying to go for shock value, it was trying to, oh my god, you're doing a terrible terrorist thing. The thing that struck me is, during the nuclear explosion sequence in Call of Duty, you're wounded, you're dying, you literally, like, all your controls are slowed down. Everything gets clunky. It's not fun. It's not pleasurable. There's no joy. There's no enjoyment in playing it at all. And that was part of what made that sequence land. And then you get to Modern Warfare 2, and you are in complete control. You have full control. You can choose to shoot. You can choose not to shoot. You can have a shooting gallery with the innocents if you so desire. And it felt a lot to me like they wanted this gameplay sequence to have the potential to be fun. And I felt like, for me, that was what undercut it a lot, was this idea that you're still allowing me to do normal gun gameplay and shoot things that move on the screen. Which, that was kind of what broke that for me.
Yeah, well, I think, I don't know, I'm torn on that. I played through it however long ago it was now, that for people who don't 100% know what we're talking about, I believe it was called No Russian is the level. It's infamous in its execution, and I think it's like, technically you can go through the whole thing without shooting people, and like technically you can skip it, but at least for my recollection, it wasn't very well communicated.
No.
Maybe they went back and patched it. It's not like, hey, you're about to walk into something very fucked up, and if you don't want to do it, consider this. For me, I think it's So you talked about Modern Warfare 1, where you're kind of crawling out of I believe you're in like a plane that crashes. Yeah. You're basically like, and I don't even remember that it's super heroic. It's not like you alone survived long enough for the nuke to go. Like, we've seen all sorts of self-sacrifice in media, right? Like, I don't even believe it was like that. It's really just kind of like, hey, here you are stranded on the battlefield in your last moments, seeing kind of this carnage unfold, and then the bomb itself. And you're like, wow, that's like a kind of deep, sort of pensive moment. There's also one in the beginning of that game where you're someone who is on their way to being executed.
Yeah.
And that one got me as well, because I think it's your first inkling that they're going to give you these sections that you can't really play, or that feel more like Sims, and you can like look around in the car and see the like chaos and unrest in the city around you. For this No Russian one, it's like, I hear what you're saying in terms of like, oh, it felt like they tried to have their cake and eat it too. But for me, it's like, oh, I don't think that's a cake we should have been eating.
Yeah.
It's like, because I imagine that without sans gameplay, right? Say it's similar to the other sections we're talking about, where it's just kind of on rails. You don't really do anything, but you're kind of immersed in the experience. And I still think this kind of ties a little bit back to it's not the greatest segue, but it's a little bit back to something you were talking about how these paintings that depict anguish and disgust and stuff, and how they have an important place in kind of the greater pantheon of art and stuff like that. But the line is, you don't have to suffer to make art, and art is not better when it's made from suffering. And I'm sure that this is something that but it's, I think, an important part of the discourse of, what is fun, what is art, subjectivity, shit like that, right? And so when I think about the No Russian sequence, it's like, okay, is there a way you can make that artistic? Almost certainly, I can imagine so, and I'm certain that there are people who would argue that it was already done artistically. But is it necessary? At least in the global context of the world that we lived in, and we live in now, right? Things haven't become less globally restless. And so it's weird, maybe in an alternate timeline where 9/11 doesn't happen, and, we don't go through this like renaissance of discriminating against people from around the world again over airport attacks. That scene can be done without all of the extra baggage. But it's one of those that just feels like, all right, you could do this, but why? Yeah. Why did you do that?
Yeah, because as I remember the narrative of Modern Warfare 2, and I don't remember it much because after the first one, the story isn't really. But as I remember the narrative, the point of the scene is to demonstrate like the absolute, like the viciousness and the vileness of the villains that you're fighting. Is to demonstrate very physically that these are terrible, terrible people and they need to be destroyed. And it's like, there's a lot of ways you can do that. The film has done this for decades, where it's like, instead of actually showing them doing the terrible thing, you can cut away and have some of the sound from the terrible thing playing, or you can just kind of have a news report on screen saying that this terrible thing happened, or like there's all kinds of ways you can have a character encounter someone who was there when the terrible thing happened and have them relate their story of what happened. The thing about showing it directly and letting you play the sequence, like letting you participate in the violence, that's kind of a... What's the point of doing that? Well, because they wanted the shock value, they wanted the articles, they wanted the discourse, and they wanted the marketing.
Yeah, we're talking about it, so technically they got it.
It's a success.
As frustrating as it sometimes can feel. There's also just like, I don't want to go too into it, but there's also like a weirdness around in the story. You're playing an undercover American that's with the Russian terrorist group. But then they're posing as a group of, I think, Middle Eastern terrorists or Eastern European. They're posing as a different group. And then at the very end, you get executed and they reveal that they've known you were a double agent the whole time, which then makes the global narrative of like, these bad guys got away with something and blamed it on America, hurting their own. So there's just like a bunch of weird kind of depraved table stakes in like, oh, you're playing an American who's doing this, but you're like, oh, I'm doing it for my country and it's honorable that I'm undercover, my mission's important, and like all of that trapping is like, there's weirdness. I don't like it. It's bad. But I think to kind of take this in a bit more of a positive spin, there's a game that I played very recently that I feel is one of the more important games I've played. People have been recommending it to me for a year. Someone bought it for me for Christmas. We finally played it on stream. That takes this idea of, playing through things that maybe aren't even pleasant, but having them feel important and kind of tasteful. And that was What Remains of Edith Finch. Oh, yeah. If you've heard of the game. I know.
I've watched a few Let's Plays.
Well, okay. Well, then you know mostly what the deal is. For anyone out there, I'm not going to spoil, but I'm also going to let you know what you're getting yourself into. What Remains of Edith Finch is one of these new, I don't know what we call them, walking simulators. Feels like it's disingenuous.
Yeah, I feel like it's just like an exploration narrative.
Yeah, someone has used the term immersive sim. There's all sorts of things, but basically, if you're looking for a traditional game, this is not going to be it.
Yeah,
it's also very cheap relative to other games, and it is quite beautiful, stylistically great, visually awesome. This is a game that if it's not I don't think it's on VR, but I hope that it comes to VR because that would be a perfect way to experience this. Very clean, not very much HUD, and you play a young woman named Edith Finch who returns to her ancestral home for her family of about like a century, and you read and rediscover things that trigger memories of her ancestors, and very specifically, you play through how they died, and there are times I played it on stream. I cried. My partner Tien came home, and I was like, "Tonight you have to play Edith Finch. It's like 3 hours to 4 hours max. Like you can get through it pretty quickly. It's about as long as it needs to be. But there are moments where once you kind of get it, once the jig is up and you know what the game is about, right? You've played through one or two of these memories now, and you're like, oh, they all kind of end in death. There's a bunch of, you see the family tree in your like pause screen, and you see that everyone has a death date. You're like, oh, I get it. It's about death. It takes what could be a shock value thing or what could be insensitive and makes it cathartic and makes it reflective. And actually, each individual story, some people were good people as they lived. Some people weren't great people as they lived. But the relations all tie back to the person that they were, the impact they had on the lives of those around them. And I also think, kind of crucially for a narrative like this, it doesn't fully absolve people of their sins, but it kind of comes to grips with what I think is a very mature take on the situation, which is just because someone was a bad person doesn't remove the good that they have done in the lives of the people who they're related to, and vice versa, right? If someone's done damage through negligence, you see that replicated and oftentimes reciprocated down the lineage of these people as you play, and it's very intense. It's a crazy meditation on life itself, connecting with each story has its own little gameplay hook. Connecting with them in these ways is so unique. And it's so real and it's so raw that when you're done after each one, you're just kind of sitting there like, damn. And then the game respects it and is like, cool, go play around in this beautiful house before we hit you with another one. And I apologize for rambling on this, but it's more about it is what is the end goal? You were talking about shock, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to claim to know 100% of the intentions of the people who made the No Russian sequence. I'm sure they might have had some good ones, but Edith Finch is definitely crafted for you to say, no, this game gets better if you have loved ones that are gone. This helps you gain perspective. This helps you. It's supposed to be healing in the way that it is also sometimes quite sad. And I think when you have that as your mission or intention, you can clearly see, even if not everything lands for you, just how differently and how beautifully the message is handled, and how that really makes all the difference when it comes to a piece or a game or music or the art that we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very interested in Edith Finch. I've wanted to play it for ages, but I just keep not being able to get myself together to sit down because I know what happens in the game, and I remember, like, especially the sequence with the fish.
Yes, and the fish cutting is kind of the famous one.
That one really, when I watched a Let's Play of that, and that one really got to me. And from that point on, I've been I could start it right now, but I don't want to be sad tonight.
Right.
So I've been holding off on it.
I think it's a good cry. If anyone's still listening after this, I think it's a good cry. I think if you don't want to cry at all, you don't have to. But I think it's a positive experience.
Yeah, it's the same reason I can't replay Papers, Please, is because it's just that anxiety, which is what you're meant to feel, which is what the experience of the game is. It's about letting you into that kind of life and letting you know what it's like to be that kind of person. It's like, I adore the game, but I don't want to feel like that again, ever.
Yeah. No, I mean, Evo just ended, right? And I was watching some of the Dragon Ball Fighters top 8 with my friend Chris, and Tien is here and is like has to call a car to go to they're in Seattle right now. They're visiting Seattle for a week for work, and they're like not calling their Uber because we're all on the edge of our seat, and it's tense and it is anxiety inducing. And like I've always known that. I think you know that as a fan of esports, like competition, it makes you feel that way. But then the casters themselves called it out. They were like, this is what makes fighting games unique. And I was ready to hear, not that I love fighting games. I've been playing fighting games for a very, very long time. But, you know, I was prepared to hear the, like, you know, the things that felt like overtures. But what I heard was them talking about, like, no, this anxiety that you're feeling, this tension, that is why we believe fighting games are unique, is that you are there with the competitors. You feel what they're feeling, and you rise when they get a hit, and you lose it when they miss and they miss their blocks or something. And I thought about how I don't know, how that feels like an integral part of fighting games, or the fighting game community, that often goes unspoken or maybe for granted. And maybe some people don't know that they're getting themselves into it. Like Tien was like, I'm so stressed, and started pacing around the apartment. And I was like, yeah, I am stressed, but I've always just, my idiot caveman brain was like, me like fighting games, I'll just power through it. And I didn't really realize how that's like a bonding agent, right? Like that's why you're so excited when your favorite wins, is because you were there in every emotional beat with them as they did it.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I remember the first time I watched like a top level Melee tournament, Smash Bros. Melee. And I mean, I still don't understand high level Smash Bros. Like complete. I can't really read the action as clearly as I can something like League of Legends, but still, just the energy that was in the room. I think it was Hungrybox fighting Mango or something. The energy that was in the room, it just, I could feel after 10 minutes my heart rate was where it would usually be if I was having like an asthma episode or something like that. It was just completely pounding. And I was like, oh fuck, he did a thing! Ah! And I could feel I could feel the elation with every stock that went down. Every time someone got a kill, every time something happened, it's just that little hit of dopamine just keeping you going.
Yeah, it's and you, I mean, you can feel it too. Like when I watch fighters that I don't really know very well, you can tell when people are poking, when people start speeding up, they're accelerating, they're going faster, everything's going crazy, or when someone, you can tell when the momentum is against someone, which is like a wild thing to be able to call with accuracy, and yet you see it displayed so well when someone's looking out of it, when they rally, when they come back. And anyways, can you tell that I care a lot about the emotional part of gaming? Can you tell that this is the thing that
you've been getting it across fairly well? But actually, speaking of, might as well use that as a segue. What have you been playing recently on stream, like for your viewers? What have you been playing? How are you feeling about it?
So I am, for people who don't know, we mentioned that I stream. I've been doing a thing since I started that we've just been referring to as the Backlog, where a lot of my motivation for streaming was, right after I quit Riot, I was like, okay, anytime someone breaks the yoke of some stressful, long period of exertion, you're like, yes, time to relax. And I was like, cool, I have all these games that I would like to get to. And then I realized that there was quite a lot of them. I wasn't quite ready to go get another job immediately. I wanted to enjoy a month or 2 or 5 off of just hanging out. And then when I thought about all the games that I wanted to play, I was like, well, this seems like it might be kind of lonely to just, like we're game lovers, right? But you hit a point where, it might feel a little imbalanced, or you feel like, am I seeing people enough? Am I going outside enough or whatever? And so, my answer to this was like, I'll just do streaming. And I didn't really have a thought that it would go anywhere. Now I'm like very all in. I will, not on this cast, but another time, speak very passionately about it. But the idea was, every one of us has a backlog in our mind that we believe one day we may get to. And it grows and it grows, and maybe one day you make a little bit of progress, but rarely do you ever get to tackle it. And so my plan was, I started with 50. We cleared that. Season 2 of me is on 30, and we're halfway through that. And then my idea is, after we're done with the 30, the next list is probably smaller, and it shrinks and it shrinks and it shrinks until I've actually finished it. and I am free. I am absolved of gamer guilt from now until the end of time, and can just stream or play whatever I want whenever it comes out. And we'll see how that works. We'll see how long it lasts that I immediately build up a new one. But no, so we're about halfway through the list. There's been some really amazing games that I liked quite a lot. We started with A Hat in Time, which is came out the same month as Super Mario Odyssey, which was my game of the year last year, and I feel really bad about it because A Hat in Time is very reminiscent of Super Mario Sunshine. For people who really like Super Mario Sunshine, very fun, very very cutesy platformer. Doesn't take itself too seriously. Has a lot of the whimsy that we were talking about. I really like. There's the first planet you go to is called Mafia World, where everyone on the planet is an enormously buff mafia dude who all refers to themselves as mafia as one entity. There's like a duck and a penguin that conduct a train, and they're like in like an Oscars battle trying to film movies. It gets really out there. It's really crazy, but it's super fun. We played Hollow Knight. I played Dark Souls Remastered, which is I have a lot of other thoughts on. But no, very recently I played Pyre. Have you played that one?
I've played a bit of it, but that's one of the ones that's in my backlog.
Yeah, no, so that's what I was like. This is often a question because I find that I share a backlog with a lot of people, but because it's my job to actually play them, I find that I'm like, oh, have you played this one? If you're like, no, I've been like, working or doing my life. And I'm like, okay, well, what about this one? You're like, no, still doing all the other stuff I need to do. And so it feels weird talking to other people about them. I Pyre, Beautiful Experience by Super Giant.
Yeah, the same people who did the Transistor and Bastion.
Yeah. It's weird. You play like outcast basketball. You play a bunch of survivors in this wasteland who have been cast out by the government, and you have to play a series of increasingly complex basketball games to send your outcasts back up to the surface to stage a rebellion. Like, it's wild, but it's emotional. It's very beautiful. It's the same art style plus a billion that I think you've come to expect. Like, everything aesthetically about that game is fantastic. The characters, the writing,
gorgeous. Like, one of the reasons I never got very far in Pyre is it's like I didn't want to leave an area until I'd seen all of the area. Because I was just looking there at like all the shit they do with the colors, all the shit they do with the cover, and I was losing matches because I got distracted by the beautiful effects animation.
Oh yeah, I will say one thing about Pyre. I won't go too deep into it, but one thing about Pyre that if any of you were like, oh, I don't think I'd be good at the gameplay, the game has no good or bad ending. It's it can be good or bad depending on you, but it's different than that. It's like, I don't want to be like, oh, it's fine if you fuck up, but no, like the game is designed in such a way that you will still complete it if you haven't won a single one of the baseball or basketball games. They're called rights in the game. If you never beat a single one of them, you'll still finish the game. And without spoiling it, it will still be fine. It's not like, oh, you dragged your body across the finish line. Like, there is no right or wrong way to finish Pyre. And so if you are one of those players who's like, well, I'm just about the experience, or I don't feel as dexterous or want to fuck with the mechanics at all, like, you're actually fine to do so. And I still encourage it. It's still like $20 or something. Yeah. It was on sale recently. I don't know how much it still is.
They go on sale pretty regularly alongside Transistor and Bastion, which you should also, if you just want some really pretty games that are also really good and have beautiful music, then holy shit, you cannot do better than those two.
Yeah. And then, sorry, I didn't know how much. I won't just rattle off literally every blade, but I will say one other one. We just got out of our Divinity Original Sin 2 playthrough, which a lot of people out there, you've heard of this game.
Oh, yes.
Definitely. Right. Yeah. I feel like this is closer to your jam. I think of you as someone who likes to pick the games that you go pretty deep on them.
Yeah, I mean, I've played a bunch of Divinity 2, but I have the problem that I have with all CRPGs, right, which is that I get 20 hours into the game, and then I'm like, I kind of want to go with a different build, and then I re-roll the character, and I change the whole party up, and then I get to the same point in the game, and I'm like, nah, I like the old one better, and then I go back, and then I keep wanting to re-roll and see what can I do with these abilities, what can I do with those abilities, and I'm so bad at actually finishing a run. It's the same thing I did with Baldur's Gate back in the day.
Yeah. No, I remember. I don't think it's what is the C in CRPG? I don't even think I know.
I don't remember. I just know that it's when it's a Western.
CRPG. Yeah. Cool. Role-playing games. Yeah. There it is. We found it. We figured it out. No, yeah, I remember maybe it's a CRPG. I don't know. I was very similar playing games like Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah.
Back in the day, things like, what are those? Is that BioWare? Am I crazy? That the old BioWare before this pre-Mass Effect. Shout out to Jade Empire. That's it. Just shout out. Just if you somehow find a copy of Jade Empire, play it and then send it to me, so I can play it again. It's very good. But yeah, those games where you're kind of like, oh, I feel like I've gotten to a certain point in the game, and then you kind of want to change things up again. But the thing that struck me about Divinity 2 is, and I typically don't enjoy these games super much. I mean, I stream, fun things about the longer RPGs is you get like the people who stick with you the whole time. But I have like a very large community of people who swing by every now and then. So it's fun because it's like a snow globe with all your friends in it. You shake it up and you're like, who's here today? What are we doing today? But for the long ones, you normally have a smaller amount of viewers, but they're there like the whole time. Like they're like, I'm invested in your character. I'm invested in the fucking story. So it feels like you have company as you weather this incredibly long adventure. And so it's fun to kind of, we built a character. She was kind of racist, lizard queen. All of the lizards there are very pompous and very. I guess they're like elves in other games.
Yeah,
I guess
basically.
you could say they're very much like lizards are kind of better than all of you. And we've made a lot of very colorful original characters on stream. We've never played one that was more mean, like that would pick the rude options. And so we had this intimidating lizard queen who's she's basically the what is she, the girl from Willy Wonka who always gets her way.
Yeah, Violet.
Is that what her yes, Violet. Yeah, we basically made Violet into a lizard queen because the whole game is around being told that you're going to be allowed to ascend to godhood. And other characters are like, wow, I'm the chosen one. And she's like, cool, thanks. What took you so long? I knew this already. How do we get to the God building part? But no, I was really, for all my rambling, one of the things that I dislike about these games is they talk a big game about, the level of how many different builds, how many different conversations, how many different decisions can you make. And Divinity kind of kicked the ass of every other RPG I've played in that respect. I've never felt like there was truly such a wide variety and depth in the decisions that you can make. And some of them don't take you anywhere, but that's not the point, right? Like letting you say certain things in conversation that have not no consequence, but have, it's not like you say one wrong thing to a person on the Citadel and now everything's shut down. It's like you are allowed to build a reputation for your character, and repeated actions will literally change how the people in the world see you. I feel weird saying it because I feel like I'm repeating shit that people said for like Fable. Like I feel like I'm doing like Peter Molyneux times a billion. But no, it was wild. It was like the people in my party were like intimidated enough that they wouldn't leave, but weren't like 100% in my camp. I fucked a skeleton twice. I like set a bunch of people on fire with my flame breath and then doused them off and then made them pay me for saving them. And it also for the fans out there of stuff like D&D, it has its own, very famously, it has its own DM campaign. You can actually be a fifth person and build like a campaign for 4 other people to play at co-op. And you can like manage everything, in their world, which is super neat and a very cool take on multiplayer kind of DMing transactions and stuff like that I haven't seen. But yeah, it was long as hell. The very end got super buggy, which was unfortunate. But apparently they're releasing a remastered version in like 2 weeks that fixes all that shit. So who knows? But yeah, I hot take for me, I hated The Witcher 3. Come fight me about it if you disagree. But like these super long, everyone's like, I put 300 hours of my life in this RPG. I wince, I shrivel, I hate it. I'm like, cool, I will never have time for that again in my life. And I feel like there's no way all 300 hours of it was good. You can't, there's no way you're getting all the value out of it. Divinity came the closest for any RPG for me for feeling like a lot of the time was well spent. A lot of the time was spent doing something that I engaged with, where I've often found I had to pick and choose whether I was bored as fuck or super engaged with RPGs. So yeah, Pyre and Divinity, I'm sure I've talked about a billion games here, but Pyre and Divinity, go play them. Go buy them. Give the people who make them more money.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've played enough of both of those games to wholeheartedly echo your recommendation. I've been playing Octopath Traveler.
Oh, hey, yeah.
And
I was gonna say I knew that because I follow you on Twitter. But
yeah,
talk to me about Octopath.
Yeah, it is very like one of the consistent early things I saw from like previews and early reviewers who had been playing through the games was a complaint about the way in which the game handles its narrative and difficulty curve. Because essentially, like, there's 8 characters, and theoretically, the way you're supposed to go about it is eventually you want to have all 8 of them in your party. And so what a lot of the reviewers did was that the first thing they did when they got into the game was go and recruit all 8 characters. But in order to recruit a character, you have to play through their chapter 1, like the start of their story. And all of those starts are structured completely identically because they have to serve as the tutorial essentially for the rest of the game. So you have a character, they have a problem, blah, 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 some reason for them to go out into the world, they fight a boss, here we go. And you get to know like their special action and the scope of their story. And that is absolutely, definitely 100% the worst possible way you could play that game, is to go around and just collect all 8 characters at the start, because that gets really, really boring. But if you go and collect 3 or 4 characters, and then you do one of the chapter 2s for one of the characters and advance their story a bit, and then eventually sort of you will kind of naturally, just following the story of each character, you will get around to everybody on the map. You'll get to every person, you can recruit every person. And that's a much better way because the game dynamically messes with the difficulty curve of how hard the bosses are and stuff like this. So I think it's a very interesting case study in a game that has a structure that is kind of hostile to review, because reviewers only have so long to spend on it, and it's a game that demands a lot more of your time. And that's very interesting. And I also have to agree with some of the criticism that, like, you have 8 characters, but they don't really know each other. They don't really have any relationship to each other. It's just, oh, you're going that way. I'm heading along with you because you're good at fighting. And so there's very little with the personal relationship between characters that made Final Fantasy VI so great. But each character has a story that's good enough that it's like you can kind of accept that the other 3 are just kind of along for the ride in return for them being along for the ride for the other guys.
Yeah, so this is one that I've yet to play. Honestly, my community, because, I talked about how in the future I'm going to be doing Backlog 3. We're basically going to continue going, and then the backlog will shrink naturally as we continue until it eventually evaporates. So, like a big one that'll be the like premiere for the third one when it comes along is going to be God of War.
Oh yeah,
because that came out like right as it came out a little after I had already started, so I didn't get to get it in. But enough people have messaged me and are like, "Yo, let me know when God of War comes around. I want to be there for the God of War run. I think it's going to be fun." And so Octopath is one that I was like, okay, well, seems like a game worth checking out. Like, I'll evaluate it. And I had some harsh reactions from people who were like, actually don't. Like, I don't want to see you play that on stream. And I was like, oh, okay, well, why? What's going on? So I dug into some of, le discourse. And I hear a lot of what you're saying. I think for me, the way that I would wrap it up is that it seems like a beautiful game. I know people who love it. I know people who have been like, wow, game of the year. Felt like I really enjoyed my time with it. But it also feels like how can I put this? It feels like it has a lot of these systems that you're talking about where it's like, oh, you start at level 1 with everyone and you kind of progress their story one by one. You can collect them all at the beginning, or you can progress their story and then whip back to level 1 for everyone else. It feels like it has a lot of interlocking systems that can accidentally make you feel like you've played the game wrong.
Yeah. Well, that's
some people,
that's actually interesting because every character has like a story ability, like a special ability. Like the thief can steal stuff, and the dancer can seduce people and stuff like that. And what I found very interesting is that there's a set of abilities. Like the thief can steal stuff, but then you also get a merchant who can buy stuff, and it's the same stuff. Like you can get the same stuff from people, and both abilities essentially do the same thing. But one of them has a chance of failure, which will cost you reputation in the town, and then you have to go through a whole thing to restore your reputation. But the other one lets you just buy stuff with money, which of course costs you resources. And there's a lot of interesting trade-offs there with the system. But what can absolutely happen, and that happened to me when I started with the thief, is that you start with the thief, you try and steal a bunch of stuff because that's what the thief do. And then
you're like, oh, I want to do the thief button.
Yeah, and then your reputation is ruined in the town, and you have to go through like a whole thing, and you have to pay a ton of money to a barkeep in order to restore your reputation. And then it kind of feels like once you get to the merchant, you kind of feel like, oh, but I could have avoided this risk the whole time. I could have avoided taking this risk and having to do all this stupid stuff. So like I get what they were going for in terms of creating this risk or reward thing, where like you can get this thing if you just pay and then no negative consequences, or you can risk it and maybe get negative consequences. But that would have worked a lot better if you had that option more clearly, like from the start, so you didn't go through a whole bunch of the game accidentally fucking up a lot.
Yeah, and this is like, the part of this, what I'm going to say is feels silly, because, it's like, well, I prefer games that are well made, or like, I like good mechanics, right? Like, like, of course, we all like shit like that, but one of the greatest things that I can appreciate in a game are games that play pretty well no matter which thing you choose.
Yeah.
Like, and that's and there's a different discussion about like whether choices are all meaningful or whether they're all good or something. But I think like, okay, we'll say Breath of the Wild, for instance.
Yeah.
Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, very popular game. If you haven't heard of it, I don't know how you found this podcast, but you can do the main story in any way that you want, and you can start with any of the four mythical beasts, whatever they're called, something great
divine
beasts. Divine. Thank you, God. I'm a fake boy gamer that I can't remember it. But the cool thing is, because beating each one, unlike Zelda's in the past, where it's like, well, this one gives you the hook shot, so you have to do that one before this one, because then you can't use the hook shot to get into that one. Each one gives you a unique ability that will augment either your ability to explore or fight in such a way that when you get it first, it feels special, and it feels like it informs how you move through the game next, right? Like I did the one that gave me the massive jump ability, which is great because I loved exploring. I maxed out my stamina before I got a single heart piece, so I was dying to everything, but I was damn sure climbing every fucking mountain. And so when I did that, it felt unique. It felt cool. But then I heard people who were like, oh, well, I went to the fire volcano and got my like invincibility shit from him. And then I actually went basically into the lion's den from that point. And all of those challenges I had been shying away from because I couldn't fucking fight anybody because I was super weak. They just like bouldered their way into them, and it really made their experience feel different. So obviously Legend of Zelda Mastercraft, you can't just do it at the drop of a hat, but that's kind of the thing that has made me a little queasy about Octopath, is that it feels like if I were to start that game and I don't have people be like, okay, now make sure to use either the merchant or the thief, or whichever one's going to give you money at the beginning, or make sure that you really think about the one you pick first, or like don't pick this one first. Like it feels like Path of Exile to me. Another very popular game that people play that is known for having a crazy ass skill tree, and people like me just bounce the fuck off of it because we don't want to do a bunch of research on the builds first. We want to just try it out, and it's like, oops, trapped yourself. Now you're doing a terrible build that can never be salvaged, and it's garbage, and you're garbage, and you should stop.
Yeah.
Those things really get me. And so I love when games have the ability to make it be like, you're cool. You're going to have to make some trade-offs, but you're cool.
Yeah. I think actually Octopath Traveler does do that really well. Like I think so far my experience has been, I've tried starting a few saves and like picking up different characters. And so far my experience has been, you can always win a fight. Like always. You can always win a fight so long as you're like reasonably within, the level range that the game expects you to be within, because the combat system is so it's basically an evolution of the Bravely Default combat system. I don't know if you played that game.
Yeah. No, I've heard that, and I did like Bravely Default a lot.
It's basically that where you're constantly making trade-offs against acting right now or waiting so that you can act multiple times and do a ton of damage at the same time. And pretty much the whole combat loop so far, for me at least, and it gets more complicated as the game goes on, is about find the weakness of each foe and then plan out, okay, so they have 3 shield points. I need to break those 3 shield points before I can do real damage. So what am I going to do with each of my turns that will either deplete a shield point or keep my party alive until I can deplete the shield points? And then once you deplete them, that's when you kind of have to also be ready to have a lot of resources available to spend doing damage in the brief window that you have before the shield replenishes. And what I've found so far is that pretty much no matter who you have, and that's something that the designers must have fucking spent a lot of time with spreadsheets to work that out, but no matter what characters you have, any enemy you encounter, you will have one of their weaknesses at least, so you can always break the shield. But it's just about finding exactly which ones and having strategies for, okay, how am I going to find out what the weaknesses of these new enemies are? And so, like, I feel like in terms of being able to get through the game and in terms of being able to feel powerful or at least competent in battle and stuff, and not feel fucked over in that regard, Octopath Traveler does a really good job. It's more the thing about like that the stories don't really mesh together in any meaningful way, and this sort of dual ability system where one of them is sort of the safe option that's a bit more expensive, and one of them is the risky option that could get you stuff for free. That they're not quite tied together as much as I would like, but in terms of you can start any character, you could build any party that you want, and you're going to have customization options, you're going to have abilities, and any party can get through the game. The downside there, of course, is that you can't go around and find the ideal build. Like, there's none of that, like, Final Fantasy VII stuff where you kind of, this materia on that guy, and then this combination, and keep his health at this level and stuff like that. That doesn't really apply.
So I think, it sounds like what you're saying. I mean, it sounds like it doesn't have, like, full stop a lot of the things that I super dislike. I guess more, I've yet to experience it. What I'm saying is kind of more of a reflection of a lot of the people that I know have been saying that they felt regrets at one point during the game. And I think that is the overarching feeling that I have is where you're like, when you make a decision, and it's not like, one person who listens to this is going to be like, well, all decisions should have consequences. You can't not get punished. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I understand. Yes. Fair. But the saying that, like, every step of the way or at a few points, you're just like, man, I'm dissatisfied with this thing, and had I had more information or information that I felt I should have had, I would be enjoying the game more. I think that's where it comes down to it, right? Because Octopath is not a League of Legends. It's not a strategic game that should have a perfectly balanceable thing. Everything has an equal and opposite reaction, right? It should be first and foremost about letting you experience the story and hopefully having fun through that. So yeah, it definitely seems contentious. It seems like some people super love it. Some people are like, I love it, but I remember. I mean,
you do have to be into old school JRPGs. Like that's the DNA that it's taking. From.
If you're not about that, but then I don't know why you would buy the game anyways, right? But I'm certain that people have made that mistake. And I remember Christine Love was tweeting that Octopath is currently her game of the year and worst game of the year at the same time. And it's just apparently it comes down even, I don't know your opinions on the art direction. Apparently she was talking about how some of the particle work is there's like a healthy disconnect between, like, there's parts of moves that will look really beautiful, and then the particle work that will come to follow feels extremely disjointed from the theming or from everything else that's set up. And so you're like, I don't know. Her words, not mine. So I'm not going to try to drill down.
I'll agree with that. Like it blends very strongly with that, like, 16-bit aesthetic, but in a complete 3D dimensional, modern landscape with modern effects animation and stuff like that. And sometimes sometimes they don't fit together. Yeah.
So I'm sure when they do, it looks beautiful.
Yeah, it looks fucking awesome.
I like accidentally. I'm fine with spoiling myself a little bit on stuff because I normally don't have all the context to make it make sense, but I walked into one of my friends streaming who was on the final boss, and I got a glimpse of it, and I was like, no, this looks tight. I'm like, wow, this is cool as hell. whatever's going on this screen. It's very intense and very bright, but it looks cool. So I definitely think, I've seen times where it works, or like the big boss battle designs seem pretty neat, but I've also seen some where it wasn't great. One thing, though, it'd be remiss if we didn't talk about is that apparently there are flying squirrels that use a move called D's Nuts. Yeah. And I think that alone is probably, if someone's on a 50-50, if they're on the fence, that should get you off the fence one way or the other, however you feel about it.
Yeah, I suspect that's one of the translators having a little joke with with Square Enix and nobody caught it. But yeah, that made me laugh the first time I saw it as well.
Yeah, as a former patch notes writer, I live whenever I see someone sneak a joke into somewhere that not everybody saw or not everyone understood. They're like, well, that's not allowed, but I guess it's out there now, and you'll never be able to track down the person who did it. Usually, hopefully,
it was him.
Yeah, stay strong out there. He, they, she, whomever who put the D's Nuts joke in what is supposed to be a kids RPG. You're great. No, I shouldn't say kids, but it's, you would give it to a kid.
Yeah, I mean, given the subject
teenager.
matter, a teenager, I think the subject matter in some of the stories gets a little Game of Thronesy.
Sorry, I didn't mean to like openly reveal my biases. I feel like RPGs are by and large about as volatile in their contents as the kinds of novels you want kids to read.
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
It's no worse than a YA novel.
Yes, there's going to be some adult content, but it's like it's about the same. You're going to get the same kind of depth and value out of it, generally speaking.
Yeah, it's not Lisa, for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. Yeah. So I have got to go relatively soon because I got to upload.
Yeah, that works out fine, actually, because we've been going for about an hour now. So where can people find you online?
Where can people find me? I'm bad. People would, if someone had to social media manage my, they would be upset. Both my Twitter and Twitch are twitter.com and twitch.tv/Scarizard you can find me and then my YouTube and Patreon are just Scarizard themselves. So yeah, consider dropping by the stream sometime. Kind of the big draw, as I've talked about, is I'm always playing a new game every week. We run community League of Legends games every 2 weeks where I give away legendary skins, and those are I started it 16 weeks ago now, thinking it would be just more of a gimmick, and it's been some of the most fun that I've had. And a lot of people are like, I reinstalled League of Legends to play with you guys because it seems like a lot more fun and it seems like a balanced experience. So yeah, Twitter, Twitch, we have a Discord. It's free. It's not sub only. You can just come on in and talk it out. So I'm pretty findable, I would say.
Yeah, and if you Google Scarizard, then you'll usually find him everywhere.
Yeah, but if you want to see me playing games, you can come by the stream, or by the time this is anywhere online, if you want to see me playing Magic the Gathering, I'm launching a Magic the Gathering YouTube series today, and we're going to be doing that every week. This is going to be a weekly thing for us, so that'll be exciting. But yeah, any and all of that is
what's the title of that Magic series?
The title is Friendetta. Which perfectly captures in my mind the feeling of multiplayer Magic the Gathering. You'll make a deal with your friend, you'll betray them the following turn, sketchy alliances, but also very specifically, I have a bunch of friends that I love playing with, and we'll get very briefly salty, and we love putting the knife in each other's back, but all in the name of good fun. We don't want people to feel legit bad, but we're also going to blow up your lands if we get the chance. If it's going to set you behind a little bit. And for me, the chaos, the politics, the kind of race of how long will I agree to not attack you? Maybe I can do one turn. Something like that is what I love about the format and what's driven us to turn it into a YouTube series.
Excellent. And as for me, you can find me, on YouTube at TBSKYEN. Pretty much everywhere. I've been good about keeping that pretty consistent. So if you Google TBSKYEN, you will find me.
What is the TB?
That old story. It's the first.
Well, fuck. I mean, if it's gonna take you like
it's
a million
not.
years,
the first website I ever had a community on, where I ever had friends and stuff, was a forum for artists in Denmark, and it was called Tiny Ball, which has initials TB, and I was an admin for that site, and I was like, that was kind of my entry point. So that kind of got stuck onto my name because Skyen is pretty much taken everywhere. So that was just an easy way to get a handle online and kind of remember my roots, man. Remember where I came from.
Wow. I like that voice. Never do it again. Tiny Bola?
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
Tiny Ball. It's Danish. Nobody can explain it. Yeah.
Yeah, so Danish for tiny boy.
Well,
tiny boy Skyen.
Danish for the drawing board, but yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, there it is. Yeah, you see, my Danish is at the par. I certainly noticed.
Anyway, thank you very much for hanging out with me, Scarizard, Patrick.
Yeah, dude. Thank you. I know. Yeah, you, like you said, you just got in for hella traveling. All I had to do was like wake up and wait for you to send me a message. So it did not take a whole bunch out of my day. Thank you for sticking with me and making sure this happens. And hopefully anyone out here who's listening to this will appreciate it and encourage us to do it again in less than 6 months.
Less than 6 months. Let's shoot for like a 4-month maximum and see if we can get it done within that time span.
Yes. 4 months. No, I like it. I like this goal setting. Over what? Under promise, over deliver.
Exactly.
All right.
So thank you all very much for listening. Next episode of this will come out whenever, us two assholes can find a time to get together, and we will see you next time.
Or if you ask really nicely.
Or if you ask really nicely, that also helps.
Yeah, and loudly, but nicely. There you go. All right,
sweet.
Later, dude.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to the first episode of BC Beards. This is something I've wanted to do with Patrick with Scarizard for a very long time, but the premise of the show is we're busy, and so we can't find time to get together, and that's a thing that happens a lot. So if you liked it, I would very much appreciate if you left a like down below, if you left a thumbs up, or whatever you can do. Share it with people who might be interested in listening to, an artist and a game designer talk shop about games and stuff like that. And if you have any questions, this is important, by the way. If you have any questions, anything you'd like us to talk about, suggestions for topics, things we should cover, or just bring up and try and sort out, please leave those in the comments down below, or tweet them at us, or put them in the chat when Patrick is streaming. Do whatever the heck. And we would love to talk about. We would love to talk about stuff that you guys want to hear about, because him and I can shoot the shit all day, but it's gonna get a little self-indulgent. So, you guys help keep us in line, help keep the show interesting, and hopefully we'll be able to do this before 6 months. Thank you. By the way, my microphone quality was a little bit off in this episode because I had to use a different microphone than the one I normally use. I dropped it on the floor. I dropped my normal microphone on the floor. It stopped working for a bit. I had to repair it. It was a whole thing. Now it's back, and the next episode I'm gonna sound like I usually do. So, yeah, please forgive me. Like, share, and subscribe, and go to his YouTube channel. Links down in the description. Subscribe to Patrick. Subscribe to the things he does, because encourage him. He's going on YouTube. You should encourage him to be here because he makes cool things. Thank you very much.